Hi everyone. So I decided to do the 77 questions of the Witchy community tag, which I'm sure you guys have seen floating around. I thought it would be a good way to introduce myself without really introducing myself, or at least allowing other people to do all the hard work of figuring out the questions out for me, instead of deciding what to tell you. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and get at it. So the first question is, do you use runes as a written language? And the answer is no. But I am incredibly interested in runes. I'm actually considering getting me a set of runes to use for divination. Um, but I'm kind of that person that doesn't want to move on before they're ready to move on. I'm still really, really into tarot right now. I'm still always going to be into tarot, but I want to focus more on that and get to a point where I feel as though I'm comfortable with that, comfortable with the images and the symbolism, and comfortable with the reading for myself and for other people before I move on to other forms of divination. But I definitely do want to get into runes, specifically because of the connection it has with Freya, and I have an inkling that that's going to be important in the future for me with her. So I look forward to it. Number two is, do you feel you have natural gifts such as premonitions, hearing spirits? And if so, do you think this is what led you to this path? Um, I don't necessarily think I have natural gifts. At least nothing that is somehow different from what other people might have, or something that might make me special. I think I've always been really open to nature and to beauty and to all of the things that separately don't necessarily make someone witchy, but together make them witchy. Um, and there's a very real part of me that believes in dreams and believes in intuition. And I think that dreams and intuition in so many different ways stem from the same place that goddess stems from, from inside of yourself. And so I think that if you're open to this idea of the goddess or of the source or whatever you want to call it, whatever you're comfortable with, then I think that by piecing through dreams, by piecing through your intuition, through your unconscious thoughts, or your conscious thoughts, or your conscious, um, you can, in a way, find some answers. Um, for example, I've certainly had dreams that I think some people might consider to be premonitions. I dreamed of my friend having her baby the night before she had her baby. I've often dreamt of certain people before they've messaged me the next day, or wrote on my wall the next day on Facebook, or called me. Um, certain things have come up that make me think that there might be an inkling there, but I don't, like I said, necessarily think that that makes me unique, or that that is something that other people can't do. I think everyone is sort of open to that if you let yourself be open to it. Um, and how strong that connection to that part of yourself becomes depends ultimately on yourself, I think. But I'm not totally certain how I feel about all of that, how real this idea of premonitions is. So it's something that's going to have to grow with me, and I'll get back to you guys on that in the future. 3. What deity do you work with, if any, and why? Um, I work with the goddesses Aphrodite and Freya. And I don't know why necessarily. It's interesting. I'm kind of going to talk about number 4 too, in this, just because they're very similar. Number 4 is, have you always worked with the same deity? And the answer for that is no. When I first started out on this path, when I was just dipping my toes into it, I actually started with Selene. And it was when I first moved out of the house, and I was kind of craving that kind of parental, motherly type of relationship. And so I prayed to her, and it was really, really great for a few months, that I was living elsewhere, and it kind of phased out. Um, that relationship with Celine it doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship was less important or less profound, but that it was meant for a specific time in my life, I think, and I sort of outgrew it. She will always have a very prominent place in my heart. As I got older, I started to explore different things. I reached out to Hecate or Hecate, depending on how you want to pronounce her name, and to sort of a few other ideas and beings. But I found that I was kind of looking for something that I thought I needed, as opposed to what I actually needed. And it's interesting because the first time I reached out to Aphrodite, it was actually reaching out to her in her most basic form, which is as this love goddess. And by basic, I don't necessarily mean as being less profound or whatever, but just the basic concept of Aphrodite as the love goddess. And so an aspect of her that was just one aspect as opposed to the whole aspect. And when I first prayed to her, it wasn't to begin a relationship, but to kind of gauge what her place was in my life. And by her, I technically mean love, like what direction I was going in regards to that. But as I prayed to her about that, there was something about her that became much more profound to me, much more multi-dimensional to me, and I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't going to her to develop this relationship, but it sort of occurred because I realized through opening myself up to her that she was much more multifaceted than I had ever realized. And now I realize that there are a lot of aspects of herself that have become cornerstones of my religious practice today. Well, I'll get into that in the future. I do want to make a video about her and about my relationship with the goddess at some point. It's too crazy and wackadoodle to really go into it in a 77 question video that is already probably way too long. So I'll get into that in the future. But as for Freya, I kind of came to her because I was at a time where I felt like spiritually I was kind of stagnant, and I wanted to kind of reawaken that feeling that I had felt before, and Freya was it. I was kind of unsure about communicating with another love goddess, and I didn't want to just fall into the same kind of pattern because I was maybe too afraid to look outside of the box that I had made for myself. But upon actually talking with her and working with her, I discovered that she is much more complex than I had ever given her credit for. And in fact, I think a darker goddess than Aphrodite is. I don't think that people usually perceive Freya as being a dark goddess, akin to the Morrigan or to Kali, maybe. And I definitely don't think that she's as dark as those goddesses. I don't think her themes are as maybe bleak as theirs. But there is a touch of sadness, of mystery, of death to her. She lost her husband. She cries tears of amber. She deals with fate magic, with Sade magic. She rules. She picks of the dead, and she rules over the dead in her realm. And I wanted to introduce these themes into my own practice, and she allowed me to do that in a way that I think was very, in a way that was transitional, that transitioned well, if that makes sense. So yeah, I love my relationships with them, and I'm excited to see where they go in the future. Number 5 is, do you use any personal items in your practice? Which is like hair and sweat and stuff like that. And no, not really. I feel like that kind of stuff is kept mostly for the really powerful workings that I've not really felt in myself a need to introduce that kind of power yet. There's nothing that I've wanted so badly to introduce actual pieces of myself. So yeah. Number 6, do you do past life readings, or have you ever had one done? Who were you, and how did you die? I've not. This question makes me think that I probably should. I just watched a video recently of this question list, and I kind of believe what this witch had said as well. The witch in question is Her Speaks, who I've just discovered, and I'm kind of getting into her videos. But she said that those kinds of spreads, those past life readings, usually end up just flaming the ego. And I totally agree, because very rarely do you discover that someone was, like she said, a trash man or a garbage man in their past life. Usually it's like a queen or a priestess or something like that. And while that's very, very fun, I'm not sure it's totally realistic. And I don't know exactly what my feelings are about past lives. I think it's a really beautiful concept. It resonates with my idea of the meaning of life, or at least the meaning of my life, which is to constantly learn and discover and become a better you until you can finally reach this, nirvana like space, mental space. But there's nothing tangible about it that I can use to prove its reality. So it's just sort of on the back burner for me. But maybe I'll do a spread just because it might be kind of interesting, and psychologically I think it could have really powerful effects. 7 is, what is your favorite magical tool? I don't know if this is considered a magical tool, but I really like tarot. It's more of a divinatory type tool, but I think you can definitely use it in magic. I also really like crystals a lot. I'm getting really, really into crystals. And candles. Candles, yes. What is a song or type of music that gets you into a witchy mood? PJ Harvey is a really good one, depending on which album you're talking about. Some of her really, really loud stuff, which I love, it's just difficult to get into that headspace. But her quieter stuff, like White Chalk, that's such a good album, and it is so eerie and ambient. It's great. I've also recently started listening to Marketa Irglova's new album, which is Muna. I listened to her old album, and of course I listened to her on Swell Season, which is beautiful music. The old album was good, but it didn't thrill me. This new one is actually kind of, it's definitely inspired by religion. I think predominantly by Christian themes, which I don't normally resonate with. But there's something about it that sort of transcends that a little bit to me. A lot of the songs have things like church bells or connections to nature, such as whale songs in it. And it's just in general really, really beautiful, and I think spiritual. It's just it creates a really spiritual mood. 9. What is the most magical place you have ever been? I don't know if I've been there yet. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's still out there for me to discover. What animal is your familiar, if any? I don't think I necessarily had a familiar. I don't know necessarily what a familiar should feel like. I think that people tend to cling to this idea of familiar without really realizing what it's supposed to be in their lives. So yeah, I don't think I've had one yet. I'm going to skip number 11 because it's not applicable. Number 12, what in the craft are you best at? Probably tarot, and I think if you can be the best at this, just, I guess, building that relationship of devotee and devoted, of the mortal and the god. That is really where it's at in my craft, is just that spiritual relationship between the goddess and myself. What in the craft would you say you are weaker at? Probably actually working spells. You know, I'm not the most prolific spell maker in the world. Part of it is it's not something that like I don't feel like I can do it or that I should do it. I'm kind of a person who, for better or worse, feels like I should work through my problems, I guess in a physical way and in my own kind of way. And maybe magic is like a last resort for me. Um, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, there's very few situations in my life where I really feel so drastic or so desperate as to turn to that. So I just haven't done it a lot. 14. What is your most favorite part of your craft? Um, Probably divination, tarot reading. It's kind of a culmination of a lot of things. It's creative for me because it's sort of like crafting stories with the figures and the cards. It's spiritual for me because I use it to actually um, as a conduit for conversations with my goddess is. Um, so yeah, it's an end all be all for me. 15. What was the first tool you ever purchased? Probably tarot cards. Tarot cards, I think. Um, and then recently some crystals. Maybe incense, if you would consider that a tool. 15. Oh, I'm sorry, 16. What was your first homemade tool for your practice? I've actually not done a homemade tool for my practice. I've been thinking of maybe possibly making a Ouija board. Um, I hope anyway to make that at some point in time. And I probably should have checked this because it actually ends at 16 and not 77. So let me go see if I can find one really quick. And I will get back to you guys. Consider this part 1. And then it's going to be part 2. So, be back. Bye.